After studying this module, you should be able to understand the family system and its functions, identify the changing social trends and their impact on the development of family counseling, know about the research and growth in the field of family counseling, evaluate the status of family counseling in India. Human family is understood as a lifelong commitment between a man and a woman to nurture and care for the young ones until they reach maturity. The evolutionary perspective argues that hunting and gathering ancestors helped sustain the human family, as it enhanced its survival value, protected against threat, and reinforced their emotional bonding. The industrial and technological advancements in the contemporary world has certainly added to the newer challenges, thus altering traditional family patterns, family structures, interaction and involvement. This module attempts to outline the basic functions and characteristics of a healthy family unit, theoretical viewpoints on family, permutations in the social fabric, need and emergence of family counseling, and the core differences between family-based and individual-based therapies. Let us first understand what are the functions of a healthy family. Psychologists understand family as a system involving various levels of hierarchical orders, resulting in the intergenerational pattern of the exchange of emotions, thoughts and behaviors, thereby facilitating the developmental growth of each entity. The mutual support, love, care and dependability among family members form the crux of what may be called as the basic unit of a community as held by the positive psychologists. They further define significant relationships in terms of its 6 core characteristics. These are knowledge, trust, care, interdependence, mutuality and commitment. The family unit serves several vital functions that are necessary for the growth of the community as a whole. These exist at various levels. At the social level, the family ensures that all of its members are protected and experience security from any outside threat. Other than safety, family also ensures the preservation and continuation of social order that reduces conflict. At the biological level, reproduction and growth of the species keep the longevity of the family unit intact. Furthermore, the economic obligations involve the distribution and consumption of goods and services to add the overall well-being of its members. Now let us understand what do we mean by family as a social system. While the traditional approach viewed the interactions and influences between various members as linear and passive in nature, the modern approach considers family as a close-knit unit that actively interacts with its environment. This viewpoint insists that complex set of interactions take place within a family. There exist various hierarchies, types and levels of relationships, such as parent and child, husband and wife, which influence each other in a bidirectional manner. Any action or behavior by anyone filters down to others directly or indirectly in this complex network of relationships. This approach resembles the ecological theory by Bronfenbrenner in 1979, proposing that a family system is affected by the social context and thus lays the foundation for the healthy growth of the community. Placed at the center is the family interacts with both the immediate and the distant social entities. While the formal institutions may include school, office, creche, etc., informal networks like friends, extended relatives, neighbors together aid in the social support, interpersonal acceptance, exchange of information, goods and services, role models for young ones, opportunities of warmth and stimulation. Now let us come to the next topic, that is changing social trends and establishment of family counseling. Here we discuss some critical turning points in the socio-historical context that led to the formation of a branch called family counseling. The first topic here is women empowerment. The society after World War II saw changes in the dynamics and structural patterns of a household. The economy was growing, industrial growth revolutionizing and thus creating better employment opportunities. This formed the basis for alterations in gender roles as women began to work actively outside the house. The feminist and the women's rights movement of the 1960s led to the breakdown of the traditional institutional marriage, as women were now capable of exerting their rights and making decisions and choices. This led to the alterations in the couple relationships and emergence of companionate and equity marriages. Second factor here is increase in marital discord and divorce rates. The decades from the 1960s to the 1980s particularly witnessed a spurt in the divorces between couples. APA insists that about 40 to 50% marriages in the US end in divorce. Separation is not just a single event in the lives of partners, but it has a filtering effect on the children as well. It brings about sudden changes at various levels, such as establishment of separate living arrangements, financial crunch, legal disputes, employment-related difficulties, choice of one parent, emotional disturbance, social attitudes, adjustment with new relationships, etc. These life circumstances lead to a highly disorganized family situation called minimal parenting, wherein the usual balance and security of a home disintegrates. Next factor is the decrease in the family size. The average size of the American family steadily declined from 3.36 in the 1960s to 2.55 in 2012. Choosing to have a single or no child at all from having more than 3 children has not become only a trend but conscious choice of young couples. Next factor is day-to-day stress. The economic expansion was also related to the rise in the competition, mounting pressure on infrastructure, struggles for resources, efforts to conform to growing standards of living, and being caught in the race to perform and achieve. In the midst of these realities, one's psychological health witnessed a sharp rise in physical and psychological complaints like psychosomatic diseases, burnout, nervous breakdown, fatigue, and weaknesses. Next factor is a rise in complex heterogeneous relationships. The disintegration in the cohesive family unit also saw a rise in the newer and more complex form of relationships. Single mothers, step parents, step siblings, foster homes, adopted children, etc. became increasingly common, also bringing with them difficulties of social and emotional adjustment. Incidences of abuse, juvenile delinquency, crimes, addictions, etc. also saw an increase and may be partly attributable to the absence of a consistent, warm, and nurturing family support system. Minority populations in the form of gay, lesbians, transgenders, etc. was also an evolving social reality, developing newer forms of sexualities, relationships, gender roles, and family structures quite unlike the traditional family setup with clearly defined boundaries for the respective role of each member. Moreover, the merger of individuals from different cultures also created in the US the existence of multicultural families, further complicating the situation. Thus, the very conceptualization of a family got diffused in the modern times. Next factor is expansion of lifespan. With advancement in medical facilities, more and more families began to spend greater time together. This longevity of family life had an impact on the dynamics of relationships as well. Aging parents and postponement of the first child, for example, would result in spending greater time with the partners and lesser time with the children. The probability of marital dispute, boredom, fatigue would be high, as would be the inadequate parenting or caregiving time. In the lack of previous prototype of such situations, homes also saw a rise in confrontations, maladjustments, and breakdowns. These social trends brought with them an array of crises at the social, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, economic, and legal fronts. There were tumultuous disparities emerging. Family, that was earlier understood as a bond of warmth and togetherness, now saw a severe breakdown. Much against the cultural tradition of seeking pastoral or within family help, assistance from professional counselors emerged into mainstream. Whereas the first centers of family and marriage counseling emerged in Los Angeles and New York by Paul Popino and Hannah Stone around 1930. It was only in the 1970s and 80s that it came to be as a specialized branch of therapy. Several mental health institutes were established to regulate the provision of expertise, licensing, training, as well as supervision to register counselors. These included American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, Division 43, that is Family Psychology, of American Psychological Association APA, American Counseling Association ACA's International Association of Marriage and Family Counseling, and American Family Therapy Association. Thus we see the family counseling came to exist as a full-fledged branch of its own. Family counseling thus is a collection of therapeutic approaches that share a belief in family level assessment and intervention. In family therapy, the unit of treatment is the family and or the individual within the context of the family system, where each part is related to all other parts. Now let us discuss what is the research and growth in this discipline. The above discussion highlights the socio-historical significance in laying the foundation of family counseling, especially in the post-World War II period. Much of the first works began in family or marriage counseling with the establishment of regulatory bodies in the United States. However, we come to see that this field came to become more and more widespread with inputs from researchers in the areas as diverse as psychology, psychiatry, sociology, medicine and social work, etc. The early works in family therapy derive from classical psychoanalytic theory that excluded the relevance of family members during treatment. It was Ackerman and Framo who moderated this stand and came to merge family therapy procedures as necessary to psychoanalytic practice. They together believed that intergenerational and family of origin issues played a significant role in producing a troubled child from a troubled marriage. Much against the antagonistic attitudes back in the 1950s, they encouraged disputing family members or partners to receiving treatment. Two other leading names were Virginia Satir and Carl Whitaker, who during 1970s worked to expand family counseling by incorporating tenets of freedom and choice, inspiring a phenomenological approach and person-centered perspective to working out a family conflict. While Satir focused on communication styles, Whitaker founded existential family therapy, positing a positive view of human nature and believed that the most critical aspect of change was the relationship between the therapist and the client, that is, the I and the thou relationship. Another pioneer who helped sustain the early family counselors was J. Haley. He contributed significantly in the strategic theoretical approaches, emphasizing on the active directive role of the therapist. In 1970s was also the time when the principles of learning were adapted to the realm of family counseling. Liberman, Stewart and Patterson attempted to understand family disturbances in the light of maladaptive cognitive processes as well as procedures like modeling and reinforcement, laying a foundation that continues to be practiced heavily. Furthermore, two of the most significant contributions were made by Gregory Bateson Group at California in 1956 and the Bowen Wine Group at the National Institute of Mental Health in the 1960s. The first set of researchers studied the family dynamics and the etiology of schizophrenia, suggesting faulty communication patterns and double-bind interactions at the root of disturbance. The second set of researchers emphasized how a self differentiates from the family using a multi-generational clinical tool called a genogram. As this emergent new discipline became more widespread, it fostered foreign interest and research. One such contribution was made by Argentinian researcher Minichin. He evaluated the structural patterns of families, particularly types of families that become distant and disengaged versus families that are too proximal and enmeshed. Other more contemporary models include the work of Richard Schwartz and William Pinsoff, that combine the components of several theories to develop a more integrative approach to working with families. More recently, family therapy as a branch has gathered leading inputs on issues such as multicultural factors, gender sensitivity, and functionalities of marriages. These continue to take the discipline to a more grounded level by the exemplary research contributions. Now let us discuss individual versus family counseling. It has been well discussed above that family does not exist in isolation but consists of interdependent members who in turn are well networked within a certain context. The very idea of counseling a systematic unit implies different set of assumptions on behalf of the therapist. This brings us to reflect on the differences between group and individual counseling. While counseling a single individual and counseling a group of interrelated individuals both require a certain sensitivity on behalf of the counselor, both recognize the importance of relationships, are based on some psychological theories and involve a similar organization and stage development. However, at the same time they differ widely. We will briefly examine some of the points discussed elaborately as discussed by Kotler and Shepard. First of all, since one is dealing with a group, it is not wise to attribute failures to one person. Being a complex dyadic situation, conflicts often arise because of differences in communications, viewpoints, or situations. Group therapists locate the cause of any disturbance as arising from dysfunctional interactional patterns or the situational context of a client than within an individual. Second, having a number of clients at one time also means dealing with a variety of viewpoints, attitudes, emotions, and conflicts. Amidst this diversity between the clientele at any given time, it becomes imperative for a group counselor to be more active, directive, and controlling than when dealing with a single person. Third, whereas individual counseling usually limits itself to following a single theoretical approach, however, when it comes to a large unit such as family, the therapist may no longer be limited to person-centered, cognitive, or behavioral strategies of work. He has the freedom to vary and apply more group-friendly approaches such as structural, strategic, or the solution-focused therapy. Thus, flexibility in terms of the counseling perspectives becomes possible in a collective work. Fourth, any family also comes with its set of rules and norms, which the counselor attempts to restore by directing his attention towards the structural faults in the family dynamic. Thus, his job also requires him to work towards the organizational structures as well as developmental processes that are an inevitable part of any home. For example, a teenager may be asked to contain his outbursts and the parent may be taught to be receptive of the growing adult in him. Fifth, the dynamics of a home are such that the behavior of one member also often becomes the cause and effect of other members. This filtration process, however, is missing when we speak of counseling a single individual. The expert has to therefore consider this circular pattern of behavior in a sensitive home situation which is not based on linear causality. Sixth, developmental models that describe the family life cycle of transitions into various life stages become an intrinsic part of a group therapy and help the counselor to ground his work as well as instill an open orientation on behalf of the clients. The focus is on the predictable changes in terms of emotions, crisis, task involvement that accompany chronological growth. Seventh, it is also imperative for the group therapist to consider modern versions that deviate from the traditional family setup. He or she should be open and receptive to accommodate changes that may accompany these complex units that exist in today's societies. These may include a non-traditional structure of a blended family consisting of a single mother, step-parent, step-sibling, adopted child, or homosexual couples, etc. Thus, even as we highlight the differences in individual and group counseling, it emerges that family counseling involves acquiring a specialized set of skills and training. It therefore becomes necessary for all family practitioners to undergo a competitive coursework that specializes in family systems, dynamics, family theories, family interventions, and professional and ethical issues. Let us come to the Indian setup. The Indian family and the prospects of counseling. The Indian civilization treats marriage as a highly moral and sacred union in which husband and wife are enjoined to live in perpetual love, bliss and happiness. The Vedic scriptures emphasize the practice of dharma in a marriage. Being a predominantly patriarchal society, there are strict gender roles that classify men as breadwinners and women as responsible for motherhood and household duties. The woman in particular is called as Dharmapatni, who must perform her duties religiously. In the modern day, the marital relationships is under increasingly strain and becoming complex and demanding. Women also become victims of human rights violation, revealed the National Family Health Survey carried out in 29 states of US during 2005 and 6. It found that 37% of married women in the country were victims of physical or sexual abuse by their husbands. Over 40% of Indian women have experienced domestic violence at some point in their married lives, and nearly 55% thought that spousal abuse is warranted in several circumstances. So, while the West encountered problems with respect to issues of working parents, aging parents, extramarital relationships, etc., the largely agrarian Indian society was more traditional and still grappled with issues of domestic abuse dominant among women. In order to help couples with strained relations, marital discord, and to provide the warring factions of the family a platform to discuss their problems and to find solutions, the scheme of Family Counseling Centres (FCCs) was launched by the Government of India in 1983. It is being implemented by the Central Social Welfare Board through voluntary organizations all across the country. The broad objective of the scheme is to provide preventive and rehabilitation services to women and families who are victims of atrocities, harassment and family maladjustment through crisis intervention and systematic counseling. The results of the recent study conducted by the National Institute of Public Cooperation and Child Development or NIPSID is highlighted in the table, which shows that harassment by husband or domestic violence is experienced by 81% of women, adjustment problems by 46% of women, harassment by in-laws by 30% of women, dowry demand in 27% of women, extramarital affairs in 22% of women, drug abuse and alcoholism in 11% and sexual abuse 3%. In India, however, the prospects of clinical treatment are remote. Household or marital conflicts are still considered as matters to be tight-lipped about or to be resolved by the family elders. Following ethical protocols and licensing is even more dismal. It is commonly believed that all a person needs to become a counselor is to have good intentions and good communication skills. Terms like seeking professional help, visiting a clinic or consulting a family counselor are not just largely taboo but trigger speculation and labelizing by the majority. This stigma leads to isolation, loss of social support and psychological distress. A clinic for help on family matters continues to be limited to only a little section of the upper or high class of urban India with a high dropout rate. Future recommendations involve building on professional training, increasing infrastructure and resources, targeting low counselor-client ratio, building awareness to fight social pressures, encouraging volunteership, implementing outreach programs to incorporate the construct of counseling into the layman's psyche. Ideally, an eclectic mix of psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, social workers, sociologists and nurses must be strengthened for a full-fledged targeted upliftment of the society. Thus, sustained efforts must attempt to make family counseling not just a rigorous governmental task but also a mainstream discipline to be followed by the Indian youth. Well, now let us summarize what all we have learnt in this module. First of all, that human family is understood to be a lifetime commitment between a man and a woman to protect and nurture their young ones until they reach maturity. Second, psychologists understand that family as a basic unit of community involving various levels of hierarchical order resulting in intergenerational patterns of exchange of emotions, thoughts and behaviors. Mutual support, love and care and dependability among family members form the basis of healthy families. According to Baumgardner and Crothers 2009, 6 core characteristics of significant relationships are mutual understanding based on knowledge about other members, trust, caring, interdependence, mutuality and commitment. Family unit serves several vital functions necessary for the growth of the community. These functions exist at various levels: the social level, cultural level, biological level and the economic level. The traditional approach viewed interactions between various family members as linear and passive in nature. However, the modern viewpoint insists that complex set of interactions take place within the family and various levels of hierarchies as well as types of relationships exist which influence each other in a bidirectional manner. There are some critical turning points in the historical perspective of family counseling. Some of these are women empowerment and changes in household structural patterns post World War II, increase in marital discord and divorce rates from 1960s to 1980s, decrease in the average American family size, increase in day-to-day stress due to competition, struggles for resources and growing standards of living, rise in complex relationships like single mothers, step-parents and foster homes, and expansion of lifespan due to advancement in medical facilities. These social changes brought with them many crises at social, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, economic and legal fronts, and family as a unit saw a severe breakdown. Although the first centers of family and marriage counseling emerged around the 1930s, it was only in 1970s and 80s that it came to be a specialized branch of therapy. Family counseling is thus a collection of therapeutic approaches that share a belief in the family level assessment and intervention. The unit of treatment is the family and or individuals within the context of the family system. Over the years, much research has been conducted in the family counseling setup and has evolved as a separate specialized branch of counseling. There are certain similarities in individual and family counseling. Individual and family counseling both require certain sensitivity on the part of the counselor. Both recognize the importance of relationships and are based on certain psychological theories and involve similar psychological stages in counseling. However, they do differ significantly on various aspects. Hence, it emerges that family counseling requires a specialized set of skills and training. In India, marriage is treated as a sacred union in which husband and wife are enjoined to enjoy eternal bliss and happiness. Strict gender roles are prescribed by the Vedic scriptures. Modern day marital relationships in India are under tremendous strain and becoming increasingly complex and demanding. Women have often become victims of human rights violation, with over 40% experiencing domestic violence according to the National Family Health Survey in the US in 2005 and 2006. In order to help couples with strained relationships, the schemes of Family Counseling Centers or FCCs was launched by the Government of India in 1983. And in India, however, the prospects of clinical treatment are remote as marital conflicts are still considered as matters to be kept within the family and resolved by family elders.